this is where it all began. The church on Welling Lane, formerly known as West Bridgford Pentecostal Church. This is where I got saved back in 1992, and within a couple of years I felt the Lord speak to me from the book of Joshua about taking on the leadership of that church.
And in November 1994 I found myself walking into this building having given my life back to God. And by February of 95, just 3 months after I walked in, we were engaged and had our wedding at the church the year after.
And in 1999 we took up the mantle as youth leaders, and Eternity Youth Group was born. Two of the first two to come along were the wonderful Sos and Claire.
Yeah, and a year later we felt God tell us to rebrand the youth group so the community could come along, and we changed the name to Extreme. And it was during those years that we increasingly felt the call of God to lead a church of our own.
Now in 2006 we were called out of the church under the guidance and accountability of John Pettifor at the Christian Centre, but John already knew that we felt called to lead a church of our own. We thought we'd be passing through there for probably 6 months or so, but God's timing resulted in it being 3.5 years. It was during this time that God gave us a vision to plant a church in our hometown of West Bridgford. Around that time a number of city centre churches were popping up, but God specifically told us to concentrate south of the River Trent.
In 2010, after meeting with our mentor every month for 3.5 years, we were finally released to embark on the dream. As a prophetic statement and passing on of the anointing, David Sherman placed his jacket onto Ali. We were sent off on our way and blessed by the church at T Street, learning so much there that has helped us on our leadership journey.
Our first unofficial gathering was on the 18th of April 2010 in our living room. We just felt to gently invite anyone who wanted to come and pray with us. There were 19 of us that Sunday morning, so we immediately looked for a bigger room to meet in for the following week. And there we found ourselves in the BEECHES Hotel on Wilford Lane, hiring one of their rooms. Another 4 people joined us, and over the 9 weeks before our launch service at the City Ground, we had gathered 33 people to us.
There's a story behind why we chose Forest to start the church. It is a huge part of my testimony. My whole life was NFFC before I came back to God. We looked at a number of function rooms in the stadium, but nothing felt right. That was until the very last room that the lady was hesitant to show us because it was way too big for our small beginnings. But we ended up choosing it, the Pitch Diner, a stunning room that hangs over the River Trent with brilliant views. Not an ideal shape though, it was long and thin, it was the width of the pitch, with a huge drinks bar right across the middle and 2 dance floors at either end. But when Ali stood in a certain position and raised his arms and said we could put the pulpit here, all the hairs went up on the back of my arms as I remembered a prophetic word he'd received 10 years previously, saying this: "I saw you as a giant on the bank of the River Trent with your arms outstretched facing south." If you know the Pitch Diner, you'll know it literally hangs over the south side of the Trent embankment. There was a double whammy for me because directly underneath where we stood in that moment is where I used to stand in the Trent end singing worship songs to 11 players and a bag of air, which I still do, to be fair.
So in June 2010 we had our launch service. 140 people rocked up to show their support. The leaders of the Christian Centre came and laid hands on us to commission us on our new adventure, and the rock was born. The following week we had our first Sunday service with 74 people. That number, as somewhat expected, dropped off and levelled out at a committed group, would say, of around 20 core people who were serving in different ways. We're glad to say that half of those are still ploughing the ground with us to this very day.
Amazing. Within a year of our very humble beginnings, we'd outgrown the dance floor, so we relocated round the corner to the Brian Clough stand, where we hired the European suite and had use of all the exec boxes for our kids' work and the creche.
A year after that, we felt the time was right to leave Forest, so we started looking for new venues, and in the end I sat with the then pastor at Welling Lane, Phil Williams, and asked if we could rent out their church building in the evenings because it was free then. Phil, with his great kingdom mindset, immediately had no problems, and soon after his leadership team gave us the thumbs up too, and we spent the next year there. Moving our services to an evening also meant that we had attracted a few more, as there were hardly any evening services around at the time.
A year later, Claire and I were looking for a venue to hold our annual Rock Chicks conference, and we went to view Luttrell Hall. When I walked in and saw the colour scheme, which was basically red and white, I had a thought that not only could we hold a conference here, we could probably do church here too. So long story short, we did, for 3 years. As with all noted venues, it had its restrictions, but it was a great location right in the heart of West Bridgford where we could continue gathering people, but also start serving our community, not least with the launch of our popular Little Rockets toddler group that is still going strong today.
Yeah, and I still remember the conversations we had during that time about what we could do with the building if it was ours. As a result, a few of us started believing that one day it could just be. 1 year into Luttrell Hall, and we felt the time was right to start our first church plant into COTGRAVE. A 9-month planned out pregnancy period led us to the birth of a new congregation based out of the school there. Initially 30 of our own people committed for 12 months to doing church both in the morning at COTGRAVE and in the evening in Bridgford.
Yeah, and we led it, Ali and myself, for a year before handing it over to Roger and Kerry Robb to run. And just as we took that on, we also received a call from John Pettifor, who'd had some conversations with the church leadership at Welling Lane as Phil was looking to step down. The result was an invite for us to take on the leadership of their church. Our old church.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to our old church was never part of our vision, but it was clearly part of God's. It only took a 1-hour conversation in John's living room to realise this. Not least because there were 3 separate prophetic words given to us as we left that church back in 2006, that we were meant to be the leaders of it. Although we couldn't work it out right then, it was all coming to place now.
So we took the church on, and now we had 3 congregations. So I was the pastor up at Ed Walton on my own for a year, whilst the rest of our leadership team went over to support COTGRAVE, and we all came together at Luttrell Hall on a Sunday evening. After a year by myself at Ed Walton as a leadership team, we made the call to merge the Bridgford and Ed Walton congregation because amazingly, in coming back to our home church, we inherited a mortgage-free building.
Yeah, we've been renting for 7 years, setting up and packing down, so finally we were blessed to have our own base. We've always tried to be clear that buildings were never going to be part of our vision, but they would be strategic in helping us fulfill it.
We took a bit of a blow a year later in 2017 when Roger and Kerry felt called to move on from the Rock. Although we still continue today to have a presence in the community there, we made the decision to temporarily bring the COTGRAVE congregation over to Ed Walton. And even though it's over 2 years later and still the congregation hasn't reformed there, God's timing isn't our timing. But we do know it will happen. And there's an increasing feeling that along with Keyworth and Ruddington, it was going to be sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so right at the start of this year, the final year of our 10-year vision, there was a fresh confidence that God was about to do something new within us all. We immediately gathered all interested parties to get together and pray in COTGRAVE, Keyworth and Ruddington, and it was amazing how God was speaking to us all at the same time about these 3 locations. And also in February I received what I believe were 2 prophetic dreams specifically relating to the pandemic that we now find ourselves in, and also to how God was going to use the lockdown to get us ready for what he was going to do on the other side of it.
We've already seen God move a mountain for us to prepare a way for a Rock Church presence in Keyworth. And pre-lockdown, we'd just started monthly services in Ruddington, and we'd also released Israel to re-establish connections in COTGRAVE and to start building new ones to establish a new work there.
So here we are, exactly 10 years on. Are we where we thought we'd be? Absolutely not. But our ways aren't his ways. And although the details of what lies ahead for us are unclear, there is a certainty like never before that we're about to embark on a season of fulfillment unprecedented. So, keep the faith and watch this space.